Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Zero to Play podcast. I'm your host, Carla Duke, and today I'm joined by Jonny Jennings. Jonny is the founder of Weird Kid Studios, an independent VR company currently developing an arcade VR game titled Galactic Bar FIght for the Oculus Quest. He has almost a decade of experience as a freelance Unity developer, while also working part-time as a program facilitator for teens wanting to learn how to code and enter into the games industry. Today, we're going to talk about the state of indie development on VR, his company and vision behind Galactic Bar FIght, advice he has for youth entering into games, and his thoughts on game jams, game engines, and the games industry as a whole. So sit back, relax, and enjoy episode 10 of season 2 of the Zero to Play podcast. All right, welcome, Jonny, to the show.
Thank you so much, Carl. Yeah, I feel important. Thank you for that great intro.
You are important. At least for the next hour, you're important to me. So.
Well, thank you. I'll take it.
Awesome. So I've really loved chatting to you over Twitter. I love your vibe and your attitude, and thank you for coming on to the show. I don't think I've had anyone from California on the show yet, so you might be the first there. But I love your experience that you've had in kind of educating the youth and trying to get people to understand technology and games concepts. And that's kind of where I want to start this conversation. So through your experience, what has been the biggest challenge with trying to get the youth involved in technology and starting to get them kind of involved in solving some of the problems today? What's that process been like?
Right. So in all honesty, I think when encountering the youth, like talking to them is actually really easy because they're excited about the tech, right? They play with it, they talk with their friends about it, like they're technophiles from the start. The harder thing is like getting parents to understand that there's a career in games or technology in general. Like the parents have no clue. And so even the program I'm in right now, teaching game design, where we're trying to find a way to reach out to the kids. And like, I was like, I don't think the kids are the problem. The problem is like the parents don't know that this stuff exists. And so really I think that's been the more challenging aspect, honestly.
Yeah, no, totally. I get that echoed a lot. I mean, it's when you're I work in the games industry and you kind of feel like you see the future of how games and kind of technology can impact the world, but then outside of that bubble, you realize a huge part of the population don't understand technology, or like, social media has been kind of thrust upon people without them really understanding how it works. And there's a lot of fears around technology. One question that I have, I just want to address this, the whole conversation about games inciting violence and people. I'm sure that conversation comes up a lot with the parents that you speak to, because that's the kind of stigma around games at the moment. Games like GTA and Call of Duty being very violent and action-based. What is your response to that when a parent says like games are unhealthy kind of thing? What's the solution?
Right. I think it's tough because I think the responsibility of, I think, media in general, like media is influential, right? It makes us feel things. It makes us, it can inspire us. It can make us feel great. It can make us feel awful. It can make us feel sad, excited. And so absolutely, like just media, books, music, film, games, right? Like we do influence people. That's what our work does. And I think the best work does influence people. But I think I always get frustrated because I your game shouldn't be teaching your kids about violence, right? Like that, like I think that the parents, and I don't want to sound, I guess, like I'm blaming the parents, but I do feel like I grew up on Grand Theft Auto, right? And so I had a very solid a system of values, right? Like I was raised like to be nice to people, be kind to people, be polite, be like don't hit anybody who doesn't hit you first, right? Like all that stuff. And so I didn't grow up and become a serial killer. And I think it's too easy to say this media makes people awful versus accepting that maybe where some of us do a worse job kind of engaging and teaching the kids. And because of that, I think that leaves kind of like a void that can allow more intense or aggressive media to influence people. So I guess that would be my response.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely a big topic that I think can span many hours of conversation and debate. Um, the whole topic of games being addictive, because the difference between a movie and a book is you kind of you consume it from beginning to end, whereas games, the nature of games, they're very much a lot of games nowadays are developed as a service. They don't end. They kind of use game mechanics that can be seen as very addictive. What is your response to kind of that when parents see that unhealthy side of games that are kind of being developed to prey on youth and make and manipulate them in certain ways?
Right. And so I think that is where I actually would side with the parents, to be honest. Like, I think that the industry can do a much better job of making sure our practices aren't predatory, right? I think
Mm.
my favorite example I think of is like there used to be a Smurfs mobile game, right? And this kid, I think, spent like 20 grand buying microtransactions in it, right? And like, there's a couple issues. Apple obviously should have had like some kind of password thing. I think it was like really early in the App Store. The developers should have had some confirmation dialogue. So 6-year-old, I think it was a 6-year-old who did this, couldn't just like go and push the buy button a million times. And they do such a good job of making all that stuff feel rewarding like a slot machine. So I can see how a kid could easily pick up an iPad, do that, see this coin animation that's crazy, and they're like, oh, I like that. I want to see that again. And
Mm.
do that, not even aware that they're purchasing a thing. It's just they like the animation or the sound or whatever. So I think the industry could do a much better job in policing ourselves and making sure like we're not creating content that's solely made to leech the players.
Mm.
I think, as a fan, as a creator, it's definitely, I just think we can do a better job. Um,
Yeah, I think that message is echoed as well throughout all of media. For example, with Netflix, you know how they've started implementing that pop-up that's like, "Are you still watching?"
right.
Um, uh, what is it? Some games have a pop-up that say like, "Do you want to take a break?" Or
Right.
that kind of thing. That I think games keeping in mind the player's lifestyle. I think that's a weird argument to make because it's hard for a game developer and game designer to think about the lifestyle of the person that's playing the game that they're developing. But
Right.
yeah, I think that those things are going to become more respected in the industry and hopefully become more popular and easier to do. Are there any things that come to mind for you of things that game developers could keep in mind to just make, like you're saying, not make it feel like such a slot machine?
Right. Well, so I guess I'd love to go back to the point you made because I think a big part of the problem is also like going back to like media is influential, right? And I think especially games are engaging, they're interactive. And I know as a kid, like when I was having a rough time, like I would sit in my room and camp out with like my PlayStation for hours, right?
Mhm.
And it was a coping mechanism. It made me feel comfortable, it made me feel safe. Like this was my safe place. And I think it's not just monitoring people. It's like understanding like games are therapy to people, right? And I think Robin Hunicke, who worked on Journey, she would talk about. I went to E3 talk, and she talked about how for years after Journey came out, people would write letters about how Journey was used for people who'd lost parents and they've lost friends and they'd had broken relationships. And this game to them, like a simple game where your goal is to get to the mountain, it represented something profound in their life, right? And I think just being mindful of that, right? It's not just like, hey, you played for 6 hours, get off the game, because I think that's also kind of abrasive, right? And if I'm having a really rough day, sometimes I know when Breath of the Wild came out, I would get lost for like 8 hours at a time easily, right? And I loved every second of it. And I wouldn't want to give 1 second back to Nintendo, but yeah, so it's just understanding like that, like it's not just limiting the player. It's also understanding how games impact players. And I'm sorry, you're asking me ways we can, I guess, better police ourselves in terms of like loot boxes and loot crates, that type of stuff. Like,
Hmm.
right. I think oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
You're good. Oh no, no. Did you have
Oh,
anything in mind?
right, right. I think it's just well, I mean, when I worked on mobile games, I worked on two games. The first two I worked on were Monsterology and Animal Planet Wildlands, and they were card games, and so they came with like you could buy a physical card pack and scan it on your iPad or your phone. Um, but our schema for like awarding, or you could buy those cards digitally in app, and our schema for awarding players was not smart. It wasn't, I don't think it was particularly helpful. The game designer who built the system was not happy with it, but this is what the client wanted. And so we'd do test draws just to see what you'd pull, and like I would say 1 out of every 15 was actually a good draw, like a card you'd want, like a really highly coveted one.
Hmm.
And so I think we can do a better job of being more fair. I'm a
Hmm.
big NBA 2K fan. It does the same thing, right? I think our games do at games right now it feels like there's so much buy pressure all the time, and I think it would be really helpful, and I think it'd feel better if I didn't feel like our games were trying to squeeze us as much. And I say that more as a fan, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's good points, and definitely something that I'm sure will evolve over time. Like it's the last 10 years have been insane for just the mobile gaming industry and how much it's grown, and just a
Right.
lot of people jumping into trends and trying to, yeah, squeeze out every last dollar. But I'm sure, over time, once people get comfortable in
Right.
the app store and downloading games, and that kind of behavior will hopefully mature a bit more, and not be so quick and fast, and trying to just get
Right.
get as much as possible. So talking about games for arts, like Journey, or games for entertainment, like Breath of the Wild, that's just, it's entertainment, it's a distraction, but that's, there's a place in life for those kinds of games and experiences. Like you're saying, it's like therapy to some people. And talking about games for education, which I feel like is another big topic. Do you see games as a tool for teaching, through your experience?
Mhm.
Have you used any kind of game products to help teach certain
Mhm.
aspects of, whether it's games or anything else?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the classic example everybody thinks of is Oregon Trail, right? Like, the classic like Western expedition game. But
Hmm.
the Animal Planet Wildlands, that was like an edutainment card game. And so it basically taught like a lot of animal trivia and taught you, it was like supposed to be like more of like it was like an interactive Animal Planet show, right?
Cool.
And I definitely feel like the strength of VR and AR and all that is the potential to like teach and kind of explain concepts in a way we really couldn't do as visually before. I think I was always really bad at math, and I'm a programmer, so people are always like shocked when they hear that. Uh, but I think what I struggled with growing up was like how abstract math can be. And so I wish I had a class that could teach me mathematical concepts so I could understand, you know, um, understand dimensions and size, and the trains moving at 60 miles per hour, it's going from Kentucky to Paris, or something weird, right? Those weird math problems.
Hmm.
um but I just wish there were more visual representations, and I think that games and VR and all that interactive entertainment for educational purposes can be super valuable, to like really make these concepts real, and not just something you read from a page, you forget it's a thing you did once in fifth grade and you never touched again the rest of your life, right?
Yeah, I've heard this a few times before about how humans are very much visual creatures, and there's a huge part of our brain dedicated to consuming visual information very fast, and that's why we can very easily adapt in new environments. And I think that's why like kids from a young age understand scrolling on an iPad, and that's a very intuitive action. And it's interesting, yeah, when you talk about maths tests in class, how it's, you'd read it a sentence on a page, and then your brain would have to kind of visualize it itself. And can you imagine a future where you go into a test and you put a Magic Leap device on, and it's kind of visually, you kind of see the train, you can visually conceptualize 60 miles per hour. And I feel like those are like concepts, like you were saying, could be a lot easier, a lot better understood in that kind of representation. That is a really, good point. And that's actually a good segue into VR and AR, which is a space that you're currently working on. You've just launched a studio called Weird Kid Studios, and I'm fascinated by that, because I feel like maybe it's just the areas that I'm browsing online, but I don't feel like I've seen a lot of indie VR developers, because it's still such an emerging technology. It's an emerging, I mean, AR and VR. I guess, the first question I want to just settle is, do you see yourself as or do you see Weird Kid Studios as a VR AR studio? Because I feel like VR and AR are two separate conversations, and they provide different solutions to different problems and different experiences. How do you see those two different industries?
Right. That's a great question. And so I guess I want to take a second just to geek out, because I think you mentioned at one point you worked on Dr. Gordbort's Robot Invaders. That was a tremendously influential game for my
Awesome.
VR work in general. And I think it's probably the best example of a mixed reality application I've seen. And I think, it's too early for mixed reality now, but I think 3 years from now, everything's going to try to copy what you all accomplished with Dr. G's Robot Invaders. So,
Awesome. I'm going to take all the credit for the team. I'm
Please
not going
do.
to act like I'm not going to act like I just went down there for a few months to help them ship it. But it was cool. Yeah. So I worked on the team at Weta Game Shop to launch Dr. Grodbort's, which was an AR experience in partnership with Magic Leap. And yeah, so that's that was a really cool experience to see the potential of the technology. Are you actively developing software on AR devices at the moment?
Right. And so I guess I'll go back to your other question, right? Definitely. So my previous job was at a company called Relay Cars, and so we did a lot of enterprise virtual showrooms for vehicles. We partnered with like Kia, Nissan, Toyota, all of
Nice.
them, to like make like small virtual showrooms. And so that job, we just did a lot of prototypes, so I got to touch everything. I got to work on Magic Leap, I got to work on the HoloLens, AR Kit, AR Core, the Oculus Quest, the Oculus Go, Pico VR.
Cool.
I've touched every, like a lot of headsets don't exist anymore, right? So I've touched a lot. And so I do see like mixed reality and augmented reality separate from virtual reality. And I actually have a lot more passion for like mixed reality applications, like what the Magic Leap and HoloLens are doing. I think that's, to me, that's the future. But I also have a strong love for virtual reality, and I think I'm waiting for mixed reality to be able to do what virtual reality can do now, if that makes sense. All right.
Can you expand a bit about that? What does that mean?
Yeah, more in terms of rendering, right? So like the challenge of like the Magic Leap and the HoloLens, right, is that you're trying to stuff a computer into a pair of glasses, and so there's not much rendering power. There's not a ton of processing power, but they do an excellent job to like make simple game applications. But it's just, I think the applications, there's just a technical bar that we kind of have to get past, and it's, there's a lot of issues because, like, there's the cost of the headsets, there's the accessibility of the headsets, there's trying to teach people how to make stuff for the headsets, like, and understand spatial mapping and all that stuff. And so what I love about VR and what I've been enjoying about Galactic Bar FIght is, like, I feel like I can let my game dev brain go crazy, and I can do anything I would be able to do on like a PC inside the VR headset. And so I'm just waiting for mixed reality to have that same level of processing power, because I think once it does, things will look great. Like I think Dr. Gordbort's is impeccable, but also I can only imagine how much work it took to figure out how to make that game run the way it does.
Mm.
So yeah, just trying to wait for mixed reality and augmented reality to catch up to VR in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I'd love to try and understand a bit more the climate of VR and the kind of stores. So your Galactic Bar Fight game is it's free to play. That's right. Is that right?
Yes.
On the
Mhm.
Oculus Quest. So
Like,
anyone listening now that owns an Oculus headset can go and download it from the store.
they
Is that
can.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
So I
So
pub I published to they call it Oculus App Lab. So it's like a almost like a beta channel.
gotcha.
It's a little rough around the edges, I'm gonna be honest, but I'm working on an update to make it much better. It has 5,000 downloads to date though, and people keep on telling me it has potential, and I think that's the best thing I could possibly ask for in terms of impressions.
Yeah, it's awesome. I saw on YouTube a few people have reviewed it and played it,
Mhm.
and yeah, it must be a cool feeling to see people like playing your game and giving their thoughts.
Yeah, I
And
had no clue. I was not expecting like that to happen. I was like, I thought I was gonna publish it and nothing was gonna happen. And then like people started recording videos and commenting on it. I was like, oh, like these are real human beings, huh?
mm, totally. So is that the only store that you can publish on at the moment? Is Oculus kind of leading the way in terms of app stores and getting, indie projects out there that can be played by anyone?
Yeah. Well, so I think for a long time, I forget their name. It's not Sideload. Sideload was like the go-to place for like any unofficially supported VR applications, and so I think Oculus took a page from Sideload and created the App Lab, which gives them a way to connect to the developers who want to make for Oculus directly.
Hmm.
Um, and so yeah, I think the main platforms if you want to release a VR game right now are the Oculus Quest, PlayStation VR. I think the next PlayStation VR headset's going to be amazing. I'm in love with the controllers already. I can't wait to see more. And then Steam VR, right, where the
Hmm.
HTC Vive and all the other Oculus headsets live. So like those are the three major portals. Like there's other smaller portals and stuff, but none that have real traction. I know we tried to release our mixed reality Windows headset app years ago, and I think it might have had 10 downloads in the course of a year. Like, so yeah,
Yeah.
you kind of have to go where the VR enthusiasts are right now, and those are the three major platforms.
Yeah, totally. It's interesting because I would like you're following kind of where the audience is within the
Yeah,
VR community, but when you think of VR in the wider games industry, it's still very niche. It's still very
right,
small. It hasn't really been adopted by the mass
right.
audience. Is that something that you're kind of betting on to happen in the future? Do you see the technology as something that you want that you believe will be in everyone's household in a decade's time?
I think so. I think so, and I think it's happening. I think that it's really quietly happening. My stepdad, he's 65 years old, and he asked me to buy my Oculus Quest One. I was going to give it to him, but he asked me if he could buy it at Christmas. And I was like, sure, Dad. I didn't even know you knew what virtual reality was, right? And so I sold it to him, and he loves it. He raves about it every time I've seen him lately. He's like, he loves virtual tourism. And then I'm on quite a few Oculus like Facebook groups. There's quite a few people who are playing it and talking about on that on like Facebook. And every week it feels like I have a new friend tell me, "Hey, I got a headset, I got a Quest, whatever." And so I feel like what the Quest has done is that like it got rid of the need to have a PC, which that's
Mm,
a huge barrier for a lot of people. Most people don't have like most non-gamers don't have gaming PCs,
yeah.
right? Um, and then it's a lot more cost effective. $300 is a lot more reasonable than I love the vibe, and I was in love with the vibe when I first played it, but like I couldn't justify $2,000 to buy the
It's insane.
headset plus a new PC. And so I think the Quest is really hitting that sweet spot between accessibility in terms of cost
Mhm,
and accessibility in terms of like you just have to have the headset.
mhm.
And so yeah, I think it's slowly growing. I think, like I said, like everything. These are all personal anecdotes, but I see people gravitating towards the platform. Facebook keeps on telling us that the Oculus platform is making a ton of money. I don't know if I trust Facebook, but that's But I do see that Galactic Bar FIght has over 5,000 downloads, and I haven't done much advertising. So clearly, there's some kind of audience on the platform, or else I couldn't have those numbers, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, I think it's happening, and I definitely think 10 years from now, VR will be a lot more commonplace. I think it's happening quietly, and so people don't take it seriously. But I think the truest thing in tech I've heard is it always takes longer than you think, but it happens faster than you'll notice,
Yeah,
right? Mhm.
totally. Yeah, like yeah, it's like being an early adopter, and once because of the nature of the internet and
Right.
just the world of media that we live in today, once something kind of picks up steam and becomes popularized, then it can just spread to millions of people overnight.
Right.
Which is both a blessing and a curse, I think, when
Yes.
when trying to build products in this space. Have you had a chance to play Half-Life Alyx on the Steam VR, and what do you think?
I haven't. I want to, and I've heard countless stories about it. I think it's probably my biggest VR shame right now because it's a one. I think it's a need to play thing, right? It's like a formative VR experience. Kind of the same way I felt about Super Hot and Beat Saber, right? Like when they came out, it's like, oh, they're doing something different, and I
Mm,
think there's something we all should pay attention to. I think Half Life Alyx is that,
yeah.
and much more in terms of like production value and Valve doing Valve things. Yeah, haven't played it yet. I can't wait to. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure like nowadays I'm a gamer, but I don't have much time for playing games, and that's one thing that I think is a weird place to be, because I talk about games on a daily basis, yet
Right.
I don't play in many of the popular games of the year nominated games and things like that, and that's I guess a problem that I need to figure out how to solve, because I just don't have enough time to play all these games.
I can't blame you.
But I'm sure you've seen videos and clips of
Oh,
of Half-Life Alyx.
yeah.
And if you had to kind of categorize, say, Super Hot and Beat Saber and Half-Life Alyx using those three titles, could you explain to anyone listening what you feel those three titles have done to kind of move forward VR as a medium and kind of a proof of concept?
Man, that's an excellent question. Yeah, so I would say Beat Saber, the power of Beat Saber has been, um, I think the freedom of Beat Saber and I guess the goofiness of Beat Saber and music. And I think there's a shared joy that happens when you watch somebody play Beat Saber, right? Even if they're playing it badly, if they're playing it expertly, it's just fun to watch somebody, look silly and have a good time, and to know that they're having a good time. And I think I know a lot of people who don't play much VR, but they know Beat Saber exists.
Yeah.
So the branding of Beat Saber is incredible. But I think it's just a fun, shareable experience. And I think VR needs a lot more of that. I'm betting on once more horror VR games come out, I think it's going to be amazing to watch people will go through VR experiences in horror. There's a Achievement Hunters video of a dude playing. I think it's the Exorcist VR, and he has like a snake phobia, and of course there's a room full of snakes, and I laughed so hard. Oh, it was. I felt bad for him, but it was so entertaining, and I think a lot more of those experiences will be fun to watch. So I think
Awesome.
Beat Saber, in terms of just marketability and the fun of a shared experience, I think Beat Saber was a great example of that.
Awesome.
Super Hot, I love it in terms of design, and I think it's a great game in terms of movement, right? Because Super Hot is more. It's entirely like, if people haven't played it, Super Hot is a game in which essentially whenever you move your arms or your head, time slows to a standstill when you're standing still, but every time you move, the game moves at your pace. And so you can literally dodge bullets. You can grab this gun, move your head a little to the right, duck under that punch, shoot that guy, pick up this ashtray, throw it at that guy, get this ninja star, throw it at that guy, and do it all in one seamless motion. And I think it's just an excellent example of like the importance of the human body, right? Like VR is all about you're in the app and the experience, and Super Hot makes your body the game. I think it makes it fun. It makes you feel really powerful. It makes you feel really exciting. It feels really exciting. And I think it's I could watch people play through that too, but I love just playing super high, and I know that's a core feeling I wanted to explore in Galactic Bar FIght. Like I want players to feel like badasses, and I think Super Hot is a great example of that. And then Half-Life Alyx is a sandbox, which Valve has always been excellent at giving you a sandbox of things to play with and manipulate. And so one of my designer for Galactic Bar FIght, he was telling me about how somebody was doing a full physics class because they found a marker in Half-Life Alyx and a whiteboard, and they were doing a full physics class like presentation in this game, right? And only Valve could make something so so versatile that you could literally hold a lecture inside the game itself, right?
Wow.
I think that's just the power of sandbox applications, and that's also something I want to explore in Galactic Bar FIght. I'm never going to reach Valve levels, but I think the freedom of VR and the ability to play with and just enjoy this like virtual sandbox in a really real way, I think that's the value that Half-Life Alyx kind of demonstrates. So yeah.
Totally. Jonny, I think you nailed those 3 questions. And I had already I knew of those titles and their kind of game mechanics, but you did a great job there of just summing it up and really, just reassuring me that why these games were so popular. So thanks for doing that.
Yeah,
are there any VR titles that you're anticipating their release, and do you think will help move it another step forward?
That's a great question. Oh man, oh boy, I wish I had notes. So I'm a big fan of Tinder, and so they're coming out. The first game they released, or first VR game they released that I played was virtual reality. Super funny, silly, abstract game. I think at one point you're talking to an artichoke that's weightlifting, and I just love everything. That game is absurd and insanely fun to play. I love it. And so the second game that came out was called The Tempest, and basically it's like a live performance. And so they have like an actor who's your usher throughout the experience. He like triggers and activates stuff, and then it's you and whoever else is in it. And basically you're acting out these scenarios. So I basically acted in The Tempest. At one point I had to fight for my lover's heart. I think we got married. It was just like an hour of like just kind of goofing around and kind of acting out this play, and you don't talk, so everything's like just you moving. And I think it was just fun to kind of explore and play around in that, right? And in like a no judgment space, a space where you could be as silly as you want. It was amazing. So they're coming out with another application soon. My friend Jesse Mendez, he's working on it, and I'm excited to see whatever else they put out, because they are so imaginative. And every time they put out something, I'm like, I didn't know we could do that in VR.
Totally. Yeah, I love it. I love the, because that's what I get really excited about, especially with the indie game community, is just people that explore new game mechanics, new ways of telling stories through games. And I think VR is, I think games as a whole is unexplored still. And when you think of VR, a new piece of technology, that's even less explored. And it's cool to hear concepts like that, because it's going to impact, I think, so many industries that, a theater, like a drama school, might use a VR game like that one you're talking about to teach a certain class for their students. And when you think of it impacting things like that, it's going to really, I think, affect a lot of industries beyond games, and that's where this podcast gets very interesting, because I kind of know in the back of my mind that it's centered around games, but soon enough we're going to be talking about games, and it's going to become very blurry as to what is a game and what isn't, very soon.
Right, absolutely. Our whole society is becoming gamified, right? Like I saw there's like a VR stage play or something. I got like an invite to a few months back. Enterprise companies are taking on VR for like training software and stuff. And so I think that's been one of the weirder things in my career. Like I started in mobile games, I just wanted to make games. And so I reached this point where like I'm getting approached with all sorts of jobs across all sorts of industries. Music industry people trying to come up with like DJ sets that happen in VR, and all these like different industries are seeing the potential of the platform. So I definitely think like games are the beginning. I think it's going to be much bigger than games going forward.
Totally. Yeah. And I love hearing your excitement about it, because you're actually in it. So that makes me just excited to watch your journey as you go, because as you start to try out all these different experiences, you might find one certain niche that you want to really go deeper into. Maybe it's Galactic Bar FIght 7, that is some crazy unique adventure that that you couldn't have imagined now, but because you're being exposed to all these different ways that VR can be used, it's going to be an exciting future for sure. So that's awesome that you've kind of established a team, and you're kind of ready to strike if this opportunity comes up for a new type of game.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess that's a lot on virtual reality, and I really appreciate all the areas you took that. I definitely learned a lot about that. Talking about Unity and your gaming journey and how you started off. Do you mind talking to me a bit about how you became a programmer, and why you chose Unity as a game engine to develop on?
Sure, right. And so I mean, age-old story. I grew up in love with video games. I was a voracious reader. I'd watch my brother play video games for hours because he was way better at them than I was. So I just had a really strong love for gaming. So in high school, when I was graduating, I kind of I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and the only thing that has ever really resonated and stuck with me, I'm good at talking to people and video games. And so my two choices were I was either going to be a mental therapist because I like talking to people, I like helping them figure out their problems and work through their challenges and supporting them, or I wanted to make video games because that was my passion, and I love them and they make me feel good. And so I think I chose games because they're more fun, if I'm honest. So I went to college. I studied. I got a game simulation programming degree, bachelor's in game simulation programming, and then I didn't want to be a programmer, if I'm honest. Like that was never. I didn't think I was smart enough. I thought it was too abstract. Like I said, I was bad at math growing up, and everybody told me growing up, if you can't do math, you can't program. It's just not going to happen for you, kid. And so but I knew I wanted to make games. And so I enrolled in this program. Honestly, it was a game programming program. I had no clue that it was a game programming program. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew that they made games and I was going to enroll and see what happened. And so I think my aspiration, I wanted to be a designer or artist, but I have no artistic skills. And when it comes to like drawing anything with my hand, I can draw a mean diagram, or I can sketch, or I can make a really great stick person, but that's about it. And so yeah, I went to college, and it was really hard for me to like learn how to program. I stayed after class. I think it took me about 3.5 years to get my degree. And I would say I probably stayed, especially my sophomore and junior year, like I stayed after class, almost every class, because I just couldn't I didn't understand what we were trying to do. And I kept like bashing my head against the wall, bashing my head against the wall. One day we're going to get it. We're going to get it. And then I like to say my brain broke, and one day it's like, it started to make sense. Like, oh, that and that, if I do that, I can get this to happen if I do that and combine that with that. And if I organize this and just like a lot of abstract principles, I started to like, I guess, see those abstract mental connections. It took a long time for me to do that though. And
Mm.
so yeah, um, in class, one of my favorite professor, Professor Randall Maines, he would say, you won't get a job in the game industry if you don't study outside of class. And so he would say this, and he would say it so much it basically fell on deaf ears. But I was listening, right? And I was like, well, I mean, if I have to make games outside of class to make games, that's what I want to do anyway. I'll do it. And so the first game I made was called The Amazing Sketchbook. It was a 2D stick platformer because that's where my stick art came in. That's all I could do. And I like really was meticulous about it. I went in MS Paint and drew out this stick figure, and I drew like 3 frames for a run animation trying to get it to work. And I went to a photocopier and I ripped out a piece of notepad paper, and that was going to be my background, and trying to formulate and get this whole thing to work. And then I made it, and it was broken as hell. Like it was a very broken game, but it was my tribute to Mario and Sonic, which are some of the games that really formulated my entire perception of video games. And so yeah, I did that with Game Maker Studio. That was the first game engine I really learned and got comfortable with. I did a few tutorials before Amazing Sketchbook, but once I did that, I was like, oh, so I guess this is making a game. And I kept on trying that and trying to work at that. In college, we actually weren't exposed to Unity at all because I went to college 2010, 2011 were like my junior year. And so the only way to make games was console and PC. And so they only taught us C++. So Game Maker, what is it called? It was Game Maker, Torque 2D, Torque 3D, and Unreal were like, those are the only game engines they taught us about. And and the mobile game market wasn't a thing. They didn't even mention it. And so when I graduated, like all graduates, it took me a while to find a job. It took me about 6 months. I sent out like 300 resumes. It was a lot of work. And so the first, I think it was like 10 job interviews, and the 11th was like this little studio in Venice, California called Saber Interactive. I went in, everybody told me how important a portfolio was. I was not super aware of what a portfolio was. So I took like a little binder like with me to the office with code samples and screenshots and like, oh no, I make games. See, you can see it on this paper because that's how portfolios work, right? And I was like stuttered my way through this interview. I was super passionate and excited, but I didn't know what I was doing. I was a kid. I was excited. I wanted to make games. And so my producer, Nick Falzon, he hired me, and they were working on Unity there. So first time I programmed in C# was that job. First real exposure. I guess so that was my first time programming in C#. I played with Unity a few months before, and I think that's what got me the interview. I hadn't touched it between the 3 months between when I played with it and went in for the interview, so I had to sell that. So that was my first professional job with Unity. And that was my introduction. That was my introduction to mobile games. I'd never seen an iPad before my first day of work there. They handed me it and were like, hey, this is the game. Look at it, because this is what we're working on. I was like, oh, this is a really big phone, but okay. And played with it. And yeah, so I guess that was how it all got started.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that story. I think it's really important for people to hear just how people's experiences go. They're always so different, and luck plays, I think, a big part of it. But it sounds like you're really persistent and you really wanted to make it work, and you've managed to be working in the industry and evolve with it, which is really, really cool to see. So if you were giving any advice to someone starting out today, what direction would you kind of push them into to get a grasp for? I mean, there's so many different directions that you could go, but I'm sure you've answered this question a lot. What would you say to someone wanting advice to work in games one day?
The older I get, the more it seems like junior people don't want to hear it, but like the way to get into games is to make games. Like that's it. People are gonna pay you to do what they know you can do. And that's really baseline. If we want to make it as simple as possible, people will pay you to make games when they know you can make games. And so the best thing you can do is pick some friends, one that might like to do music, one that can draw a little bit. Make something really basic. It can be broken as all hell. Really simplistic. Pick like a game engine, play with them, see which one you like the most, and then just go for it, right? And make something, and then make your portfolio site. The games, again, they don't have to be perfect. They just have to be functional. If you have video of them, if they're playable, even better. But it's hard to finish a game. I think that's the thing. And I think it's not the making the game that matters so much, it's finishing, because a lot of people start games. We see canceled huge games every year, right? Like games people wanted for years that get derailed. And so at every level, it's hard to finish a game. And so making a small game and finishing it is an accomplishment, even if it's Pong, right? Like that is an accomplishment. So yeah, just make games, finish them, make something small, try to have a good time.
Yeah, I love it. It's great advice. What's your perspective on game jams and how they play a role in this journey?
Yeah, I was terrified of game jams for the longest time, and 3 weeks ago, we I joined my first one, the Ludum Dare, and Ludum Dare 48, and I was invited. They're like, hey, there's this group called the Game Industry Gathering. I was invited by some people from there, and they're like, hey, do you want to join on this game jam thing? And the answer was no, if I'm honest. Like I was like, yeah, I don't want to speed run making a game. That sounds tremendously stressful. I don't want to do that. But I said yes because I would feel bad. Well, because I thought it would be an exciting opportunity, and I like the people who were involved. And so we made our indie game Sonder, which is this thing behind me.
Oh, nice.
And it's like an exploratory narrative game we made for Ludum Dare 48. And I think my best hope for the game was not what it turned out to be. And so I think we were all kind of stunned when we finished, like, we made this in 72 hours. Wow. Right. And I think the value of like game jams and things like Ludum Dare for early devs is just it gives you an opportunity to make games in a small ecosystem. I think because I'm so senior and because I've been doing this for a while, the pressure for me was to finish the game and make something great in the time that we were doing it, right? But I think if you're just starting out to make a game, if you just finish, right? If you can finish, if you work over 72 hours and you just finish the game, that is a tremendous accomplishment, and you should put it on your LinkedIn. You should put it on your portfolio. You should tell the whole world they should play your games, because I think you accomplish, like, so many people. It's hard to express how many people want to make a game, but very few ever actually finish it. So it's an accomplishment. And I think game jams are excellent for giving you a small ecosystem to learn, network with other people, learn new skills, try new stuff, and like explore game development in a really tight time frame.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. That's yeah, amazing. I can't. I'm just going to point people to that little clip there of what you just said when asking me about if they should do game jams, because I think you summed it up really well. Thanks for doing that. This is kind of nearing the end of the show. I've really appreciated the conversation and everywhere we've gone, from education to VR to back to advice on people wanting to enter the industry. And I've loved your story and how you've navigated some of these complicated questions in a really simple way. So I do really appreciate you giving your time and energy to explain all that. I learned a lot. If anyone is listening is interested in following Jonny, you can find him on Twitter at JonnyJ17. And I wish you the best in your journey in VR, and I can't wait to see how Galactic Bar FIght evolves and what your next titles are and what Weird Kid Studios produce. Is there anything that you'd like to share with the audience before we go?
I mean, well, thank you for having me, and I appreciate you. I think I'm planning a pretty major update for our Galactic Bar FIght in about 3 months. So I had to
Cool.
I've gotten a lot of feedback in the past few months. So there's some issues with like grabbing weapons. There's issues with weapon variety. I'm trying to make some of the narration is a little bit muddled. So I basically decided to do a full rebuild. And so over this next 4 months, I'm fully rebuilding Galactic Bar FIght. I rebuilt the weapon system from the ground up, and I'm much more happier with it. And I think everybody who plays it will be too. If you play it now, thank you. I appreciate it. Just know I think it's not going to be its final form for about 3 months. So I'm working on it actively, and I can't wait to show and share it with people once it's more the vision I know it can be.
That's awesome. Yeah, I can't wait to see it and follow your journey. 3 months is a nice time in the future, I think, for people to kind of forget about it, and then once you're ready to launch it, it will be back in people's minds. How big's the team that's working on it, and how big's the team at Weird Kid Studios?
Right. So I solo developed like the version that's on the store now. I worked on it by myself. That was a lot. But I invited my friend Travis Vanessen. He's the designer. He worked at 2K for a while, and I love working with him. So I invited him to join me. And then my friend Victor Villalobos, he's our 3D artist. And then I have an intern programmer, Adar Carver, who's working on it. So yeah, I think it's four of us all together. We might add more. We probably need a voice actor. So if anybody's interested, please reach out.
Cool.
But yeah, it's pretty small. It's only the four of us at the moment, and it's nice to have even four after doing it by myself. It's nice to have like other people to talk to about the work. So yeah, small team. Yeah.
Totally. All right. Thanks, Jonny. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I wish you the best. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah. Thank you, Carl. I appreciate it.
Cheers.